Here's a tale about a miller and his son, and it was once upon a time. He lived a nice life with his wife. They had some money and a bit of land, and things seemed to get a bit better for them as year piled on year. But bad luck comes out of the blue. Just as their wealth had gone up, so it fell, year on year, until finally the miller barely owned even the mill where he lived. He was in great strife, and when he went to bed after a day's work he got no rest, but tossed and turned in his bed, filled with worries. One morning he got up before daybreak and went outside, thinking that the fresh air would cheer him up. As he was walking across the mill dam, the first sunbeam was just appearing, and he heard something rippling in the pond. Turning round, he saw a beautiful woman rising slowly out of the water. Her long hair, which she was holding above her shoulders with her soft hands, flowed down on both sides and covered her white body. He understood very well that she was the Nixie of the pond, and he was paralysed with fright and didn't know whether to run away or stay where he was. But the Nixie, speaking with a soft voice, called him by name and asked him why he was so sad. At first the miller was speechless, but when he heard her speak so kindly, he took heart and told her how he had lived with good fortune and wealth, but that now he was so poor he did not know what to do. "Relax," answered the Nixie. "I'll make you richer and happier than you have ever been before. You only need to promise to give me that which has just been born in your house." "Well, I've no clue what that could be," thought the miller, "except a puppy or a kitten," and that seemed like a bargain, so he promised her what she wanted. The Nixie descended into the water again, and consoled and in good spirits, he hurried back to his mill. He hadn't even got through the front door when the maid came rushing out and called out to congratulate him, for his wife had given birth to a little boy. The miller stood there, thunderstruck. He understood straight away that the Nixie had known this and had cheated him. With his head down, he went to his wife's bed. When she said, "Why are you not happy with the beautiful boy?" he told her what had happened to him and what kind of promise he had given to the Nixie. "What good to me are good fortune and prosperity," he added, "if I have to lose my child? But what can I do?" No one knew what to do. It was a stone-cold calamity. In the meantime, good fortune returned to the miller's house. Everything he did came up trumps. It was as though the hiding places and money boxes filled themselves of their own accord, and as though money in a chest multiplied overnight. Before long, he was wealthier than ever before. However, it didn't bring him happiness without worry, for his agreement with the Nixie tormented him night and day. Whenever he passed the pond, he feared that she might appear and demand payment of his debt. He never allowed the boy himself to go near the water. "Watch out," he said to him. "If you touch the water, a hand will appear, take hold of you and pull you under." However, year after year passed, and the Nixie made no further appearance, so the miller began to feel at ease. The boy grew up to be a young man and was apprenticed to a huntsman. When he learned his trade and become a skilled huntsman, the lord of the village took him into his service. In the village there was a beautiful and faithful woman whom the huntsman liked, and when his master noticed this, he gave him a little house. The two were married, lived peacefully and happily, and loved each other sincerely. One day, the huntsman was pursuing a deer. When the animal ran out of the woods and into an open field, he followed it and finally brought it down with a single shot. He didn't notice that he was in the vicinity of the dangerous Millpond, and after he'd prepared the deer, he went to the water to wash his blood-stained hands. However, he had scarcely dipped them into the water when the Nixie emerged. Laughing, she wrapped her wet arms around him, then pulled him under so quickly that the waves splashed over him. When it was evening, and the huntsman didn't come home, his wife became frightened. She went out to look for him. He'd often told her that he'd to be on his guard against the Nixie's snares, and that he didn't dare go near the Millpond, so she already suspected what had happened. She hurried to the water, and when she found his hunting bag lying on the bank, she could no longer have any doubt he'd been carried away. Crying and wringing her hands, she called her fellow by name, but no luck. She hurried over to the other side of the Millpond and tried again. She cursed the Nixie with harsh words, but still nothing. The surface of the water remained calm. Only the moon's half face stared steadily back up at her. The poor woman didn't leave the pond. With quick steps, never stopping to rest, she walked round it again and again, sometimes in silence, sometimes crying out loudly, sometimes sobbing softly. Finally, her strength gave out, and she sank down to the ground, falling into a heavy sleep. She was soon immersed in a dream. She was fearfully climbing upwards between large rocky cliffs. Thorns and briars were hacking at her feet. Rain was beating into her face. The wind was billowing her long hair about. When she reached the top, a totally different sight presented itself to her. The sky was blue, a soft breeze was blowing, the ground sloped gently downwards, and in a green meadow, dotted with colourful flowers, stood a neat cottage. She walked up to it and opened the door. There sat an old woman with white hair, who beckoned to her kindly. At that moment the poor woman awoke. It was already daylight, and she decided at once to follow her dream. With difficulty she climbed the mountain, and everything was just as she had seen it during the night. The old woman received her kindly, showing her a chair where she was to sit. "You must have met with misfortune," she said, "to have sought out my lonely cottage." The woman told her story with added tears. "Take heart," said the old woman. "I'll help you. Here's a golden comb for you. Wait until the full moon's risen, then go to the Millpond, sit down on the bank and comb your hair with this comb. When you've finished, set it down on the bank and you'll see what will happen." The woman returned home, but the time passed slowly for her until the full moon came. Finally, the shining disk appeared in the sky, and she went out to the Millpond, sat down and combed her hair with the golden comb. When she was finished, she set it down at the water's edge. Before long, there came a motion from beneath the water. A wave arose, rolled onto the bank, and carried the comb away with it. In not more time than it took for the comb to sink to the bottom, the surface of the water parted and the huntsman's head emerged. He said nothing, only looking at his wife with sorrowful glances. That same instant, a second wave rushed up and covered her husband's head. Then everything vanished. The millpond lay as peaceful as before, with only the face of the full moon shining on it. Filled with sorrow, the woman returned, but she saw the old woman's cottage again in a dream. The next morning she set out and told her sorrows to the wise woman. The old woman gave her a golden flute and said, "Wait until the full moon comes again. Then take this flute, sit on the bank and play a tune on it. When you have finished, set it in the sand. Then you'll see what happens." The woman did what the old woman told her to do. No sooner was the flute lying in the sand than there was a motion from beneath the water, and a wave rushed up and carried the flute away with it. Immediately afterwards, the water parted, and not only her husband's head, but half of his body emerged as well. He stretched out his arms longingly towards her, but a second wave rushed up, covered him, and pulled him down again. "Oh, what does it help me," said the unhappy woman, "for me only to see my chap and then lose him again?" She despaired again, but a dream led her a third time to the old woman's house. She went there, and the wise woman gave her a golden spinning wheel, comforted her, and said, "Everything is not yet fulfilled. Wait until the full moon comes, then take the spinning wheel, sit on the bank, and spin the spool full. When you've done this, place the spinning wheel at the water's edge, and you'll see what will happen." The woman did everything exactly as she had been told. As soon as the full moon appeared, she carried the golden spinning wheel to the bank and sat diligently until she was out of flax, and then the spool was completely filled with thread. She'd scarcely placed the wheel on the bank when there was a more violent motion than before from the water's depths. Then a powerful wave rushed up and carried the wheel away with it. Immediately, the head and the whole body of her husband emerged in a waterspout. He quickly jumped to the bank, caught his wife by the hand, and away they went. They'd only gone a short way when the entire millpond arose with a terrible roar, and then with terrible force streamed out across the countryside. The fugitives saw death before their eyes. The wife, in her terror, called out for the old woman to help them, and they were instantly transformed. She into a toad, he into a frog. The flood, which had overtaken them, could not destroy them now, but it separated them and carried them far away. When the water receded, and they both reached dry land again, their human forms returned, but they were lost to each other. They found themselves among strange people who did not know their native land. High mountains and deep valleys lay between them. In order to make a living, they both had to herd sheep. For long years they drove their flocks through fields and woods, and were filled with sorrow and longing. One day, when spring had once again arrived, they both went out with their flocks, and, as chance would have it, they moved toward one another. He saw a herd on a distant mountainside and drove his sheep toward it. They met in a valley, but didn't recognize each other. But they were happy that they were no longer so alone. From then on, every day, they drove their flocks next to each other. They didn't speak much, but they did feel comforted. One evening, when the moon was shining in the sky and the sheep were already at rest, the shepherd took his flute out of his pocket and played on it a beautiful but sorrowful tune. When he'd finished, he saw that the shepherdess was crying bitterly. "Why are you crying?" he asked. "Oh," she answered, "the full moon was shining like this when I played that tune on the flute for the last time, and my husband's head emerged out of the water." He looked at her, and it was as though a veil fell from his eyes. He recognized his wife, and when she looked at him, with the moon shining on his face, she recognized him too. They embraced and kissed one another, and no one needs to ask, but they were happy again.